Senator Hawley questioned Director Tracy Stone Manning about her past testimony during her 2021 confirmation process. Manning had previously stated that she had never been investigated, arrested, or charged by law enforcement for any violations other than minor traffic offenses. Do you believe her?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I start, Mr. Chairman, I want to say thank you for your strong statement on the RICA legislation yesterday and for your leadership on this issue. It's much, much appreciated. Director Stone Manning, let me just start with this. When you came before this committee in 2021, this is before I was a member of the committee, you were asked as part of your confirmation whether you'd ever been investigated, arrested, charged by any federal, state, or local law enforcement authority for the violation of any federal, state, or local law, regulation, or ordinance other than a minor traffic offense. We asked that question of all people before the committee. You answered no. Do you stand by that testimony?
Senator, I do stand by that testimony and was proud to be confirmed to do this job.
Tree spiking, an illegal act where metal objects are placed in trees to prevent logging, which can cause severe injuries to loggers. Manning, who was allegedly involved, sent a threatening letter instead of notifying authorities. But why?
What's tree spiking, Director?
Senator, again, this committee engaged quite a bit in.
No, that's a factual question. Do you know what it is?
And I do. It is.
You want to tell us? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's when people illegally put metal objects into trees so that they prevent a timber sale.
What happens if a chainsaw hits a spike?
Sometimes when a chainsaw hits a spike, it can buck the saw.
Yeah, violently recoil, potentially kill or seriously maim the loggers.
Yeah, which is why I notified the federal authorities that I had heard that happened.
Loggers like, for instance, George Alexander, this is from an article on the Washington Post explaining what happens when trees get spiked. Loggers who are blue-collar workers, by the way, these are not wealthy people. These are not people who have had the advantages perhaps you and others have had. People like George Alexander, who, for example, in May 1987, at age 23, his chainsaw hit a tree spike. I'm quoting, his face was slashed from eye to chin, his teeth were smashed, his jaw was cut in half. That's a typical reaction when a logger hits a spike. Now, you just said, I think just a second ago, that you were involved. There were 2 people convicted in 1989 of putting 500 pounds of spikes in an Idaho forest. Senator Rich mentioned this just a moment ago. You testified you sent a letter to the Forest Service on their behalf. I have it here. The letter says, among other things, this letter sent to notify you that the post office sale, that's the forest sale in Idaho, has been spiked heavily. The reason for this action is that this piece of land is very special to the earth. It is home to the elk, deer, mountain lions, birds, and especially the trees. It goes on, I would be more than willing to pay you $1 for the sale, but you'd have to find me first, and that could be your worst nightmare. P.S. You bastards go in there anyway, and a lot of people could get hurt. Why'd you send this?
Senator, as I said at the time, over 30 years ago, a really angry and turns out violent person handed me that letter and said, will you send this to the Forest Service?
And you did. Why?
What you just talked about in 1987 to a logger, this is 1988, 9. I understood that people could get hurt.
Why did you notify the federal authorities? Why did you send this threatening letter on behalf of these 2 men who were convicted of crimes?
I was terrified of them.
Manning acknowledged being aware of tree spiking, but explained that she was terrified of the individuals involved and did not want to be associated with them. However, it was revealed that she was investigated by the USDA Forest Service, which issued subpoenas for her hair, handwriting, and fingerprints. The special agent in charge, Michael Merkley, reported that Manning was uncooperative initially, but eventually provided the requested samples.
And wanted no involvement with them.
So you wanted no involvement, but you sent a letter that says you bastards go in there anyway and a lot of people could get hurt? Why didn't you just contact the FBI or anybody, any local authority?
Because the person who did this act threatened people's lives if they disclosed who did it.
Yeah, in fact, you were investigated for being involved, weren't you? Here we have a letter sent to this committee from the special agent of the USDA Forest Service, Michael Merkley, who was in charge of the investigation. He says, and he details this in the letter to this committee, that he investigated you for your involvement. He says, and I'm going to quote now, grand jury subpoenas were issued for hair samples, handwriting exemplars, fingerprints. These subpoenas were served on persons suspected of being involved, having knowledge of the incident, including Ms. Tracy Stone Manning. You've testified you were never investigated, ever, for anything. Why'd you lie to this committee?
Hawley accused Manning of lying to the committee about never being investigated and criticized her for focusing on events from 30 years ago instead of her recent tenure. The discussion highlighted concerns about Manning's past actions and honesty in the confirmation process. Do you think she should be able to move forward?
Senator, this committee delved deeply, went into the court records where I testified against these men.
Were you issued subpoenas?
No.
You were not issued subpoenas?
I was issued a subpoena to appear before a grand jury with
Really?
with
Because
about 13
here's what he
people.
says. Ms. Stone Manning was extremely difficult to work with. She was antagonistic. She was uncooperative, refused to provide her hair, handwriting exemplars, and fingerprints as ordered by the grand jury. It was not until after we informed her she would be arrested if she did not comply with the subpoenas that she provided the samples to me. So you were subpoenaed.
Senator Hawley,
you were the target of an investigation.
Do you have a question?
You were the target of an investigation. You lied to this committee. Why?
Senator, I never received a target letter. I'm curious, I understand why this committee jumped over 30 years of my career in considering my nomination and went to a salacious moment from graduate school where I tried to protect people. What I don't understand is why we're not looking at the last 3.5 years now.
Here's why.
Senator
It's because people are killed in these kind of incidents. It is an act of terrorism.
Your time is expired.
A special agent in charge found that you were involved. You lied to this committee in saying that you were never investigated.
Senator
you were never
Hawley,
the target of investigation. In fact, you were.
your time
You lied to us
is
blatantly.
expired.
And you know it.